Hello and welcome to TMDSAS office hours. My name is Sulima and I am the TMDSAS support coordinator. For this cycle, we do have EY 2024. Today's session will just be answering any questions that we have. Just make sure that you enter them into the chat via YouTube. You can ask away and I'll just be here as long as y'all need me to. Okay, so don't forget you can put your questions into the chat via YouTube. Um, we'll be here every Tuesday, it looks like, for the cycle for the summer. So if you have questions about your application, about how to enter information in, any kind of direction when it comes to activities, I do want to share that we did have our school panels last week. They are full of useful information, especially when it comes to activities. The school admissions attendees also share things such as what they would like to see in applications, how to stand out, and other useful information that I think would be very beneficial for applicants to watch. So I will go ahead and link those in the chat so you guys can reference those if needed. We did have two panels for our medical school since we do have a lot of schools for medical. And we have two sessions for those. I'll share the first one. And then we did have another session. I believe this was last Thursday. And then this next one was on last Tuesday. We also had the dental schools panel as well, and I will share that below. And I do know that later in this cycle, probably at the end of the month, or if not in June, we'll have a session with the vet schools that can also provide information, kind of like what our medical and dental schools share. So information about courses, activities, essays. They shared a lot of information about essays. Um, Descriptions for your activities as well is something that I do remember the school sharing. So we want to make sure that if you have any questions, you can hear it directly from the admission staff and you can take a look at those school panels. And again, don't forget if you have any questions about your application or general questions about applying for the cycle, we will be here every Tuesday around this time. And I also wanted to share if you're not quite sure about whether you think you would be ready to apply the cycle or contemplating starting your application but not sure where to start, we do have a checklist that has about 9 different items that you can collect now or take a look at to make sure that you have everything you need by the time that you are ready to apply, whether it's in May, June, July, or even in October, closer to the end of the cycle. It would still be beneficial to collect these items ahead of time. And this checklist has important information that you need about the college transcripts, AP and dual credit, activities, your letters, also information about test scores such as DAT, MCAT, and the SAT analysis and science score, which is actually a sub-score, and I know we get a lot of questions about that. You can see a preview of what those essay prompts will be and what you will be prompted to fill out in your application. Information about your professional photo, information about residency documents that may be requested from you, and other list of Team DCS resources for you to use as you are working and filling out your application. And then lastly, if you need to contact us, if you've already started your application, the best way to communicate with TMDSA support is to send us a message in your TMDSA's application portal. That is the best way to communicate with TMDSAS because if you send us a message, that'll be linked to your application. So if there's something specific that you need a team member to take a look at with you, that will be connected. That message will be connected with your application. So it'd be easier to be able to answer your question as it pertains to you specifically. Additionally, if you have any other changes later in your application after you submit, let's say you want to update your coursework, you'll need to request that via the messaging feature in your application. Any changes that need to be made or updates to your application have to be in writing for our team in order for our team to be able to update that for you. So sending us a message would be the best way to do so. I do see that a few members have already started sending in questions, so I'll go ahead and display them for you all to see. Okay, so the first question is from Chloe. Hello, I had a question about entering coursework and wanted to clarify that the developmental option should be used for credit awarded. Let's see. Oh, my screen is going away. Okay. All right. To clarify that the developmental option should be used for credit awarded through things like research independent study. I believe developmental is only for um, courses that are considered like developmental. I think it's like writing and math. So not necessarily for your research and independent study. It sounds like that should be as RC for regular coursework. The next question, if I have a shadowing activity, I am doing only for a day next week, but I want to submit my application this week. Can I go ahead and put it as a current activity? Start and end date, May 2023. It sounds like yes, because the start and end date is before October 2023. So even though you have not yet completed the activity, but it will be completed by no later than October 2023, it would go into current activities. I'm applying next year. When does the application for next year open? Great question. So if let's say you're interested in starting professional school for fall 2024, you need to start working on your application and submitting it this cycle, which is in the year of 2023. However, if you're wanting to start professional school in fall of 2025, then at that point you would need to uh, start working and submit your application in the year of 2024. That application will open next year, May. It's typically around the first Monday of May, but I can just double check really quick when that date would be. And it looks like um, it may either be May 1st, 2024, which is on a Wednesday, or May 6th of 2024, since that's on a Monday. And it typically opens on a Monday. Um, but like I mentioned, if you're wanting to apply to start school in 2025, then you would need to start that application next year in 2024. If you're wanting to apply and to start school in the year 2024, then you would need to start your application this year. I hope that helps. Okay. If we just graduated but could not get leadership opportunities due to COVID, such as our school being shut down, do you know what is the best way to find opportunities? Yeah, definitely. So, for leadership, that specific section of your activities, it doesn't have to be a necessarily like a leadership position. It doesn't always have to be like president of a club. You can also take advantage of this section to indicate other ways that you weren't necessarily in a leadership position. Maybe perhaps you were part of a team at your job and you stepped up to lead an effort or a project or something. And so that you could, if you wanted to talk about how you stepped up and decided to lead that specific thing, you can talk about that as part of your leadership if you would like. So it doesn't necessarily have to be being like the president of something in order to count as leadership. It's really up into your interpretation of what that would mean and what how you reflect it or how you show that skill in what you're doing. I am looking at my screen on the side because I do know that we have information about activities during the year of COVID. We do have one of the deans from the medical schools who talks about how to find activities during COVID. It's a little dated because it was written about 2 years ago, but it's still relevant. It's still applicable for today in order for you to understand how you could maybe perhaps you didn't have official activities for shadowing or leadership, but how you can, using the information that's in the article, how you can adapt it and apply it to what you were able to do um, in that time. So let me find that article. All right, and I already linked it down below. Great article, great resource from, again, one of the deans from one of our TMDCS member schools who wrote this out in response to the COVID-19 shutdown that had, like, that did not allow a lot of our applicants to do the traditional activities that they wanted to do. Okay, next question is, should applicants wait until their application is transmitted to the school before submitting a secondary? One of the schools has a portal open. Great question. It depends on the schools and when they want you to complete that secondary. I do know that there is one school, believe it's either TCOM or one of the vet schools, but they have the secondary portal open, ready for you to complete it whenever you're ready. So I know that that is the case for some schools. Some schools will send you an invitation to complete the secondary application via their portal once they have already received your TMDSAS application. TMDCS application processing takes up to 4 weeks. So if you've already submitted during this week, I would say count about 4 weeks, and that's when you can anticipate that the schools will receive your application on their end. After that, they would be able to send you information about secondaries. But of course, every school is different, so they're not all uniform and on the same page. I will link to the application guide in the after submitting section. We do have a list of the schools that require a secondary and how they will um, contact you to complete those. So let me just put that into the chat. But great question. So thank you for asking that. Okay. What are some examples of clinical experiences? Is it caregiving and scribing? So really with activities, it is going to be up to you as the applicant to make that determination, what you want to include in your application and what you want to talk about with each of your activities. So if these are two things that you did and you want to include that under clinical, then just make sure you talk about the aspect that you want to share, whether it's like values that you learned, what you actually did on the job. But again, I do recommend that you take a look at that. In this case, I'm assuming you're a medical applicant. You can check out the medical schools panel. The two panels that we hosted on Tuesday and Thursday of last week, they are actually Wednesday and Thursday of last week. They address the question, all sorts and types of questions about activities, and their information and their answers is a lot better than mine. For TMDSAS support, all we can really tell you is how to enter an activity if it's ongoing, how to make sure your dates are correct. That's as far as of information that we can provide. The schools within those schools panels gave really great answers to these specific types of questions and regarding any kind of activity that you want to like ask about. So, or list in your application. So I highly recommend that you take a look at that as well. All right, and we had another question. For AP credit, how does that affect status for classifying as freshman, sophomore, etc.? If I have AP credit under my first semester, does it count towards the first 30 hours of being a freshman under coursework? The answer is no, because this is pre-freshman. So this is before you graduated high school, is whenever you took AP credit. So it doesn't matter how many hours of pre-freshman courses you have, all of that has to be PF for pre-freshman, and then count the first 30 hours of your 30 hours are completed at your main institution as freshmen. Hope that answers your question, but if not, let me know. All right. Another question we have is, good afternoon. For recommendation letters, is it recommended to get two letters from science professors, or should we prioritize professors and people who know us better? Great question. Not sure if they answer this in the school panels, but for sure, what I can tell you is that you do not have to have science professors. It's recommended by the schools, but it's not a requirement. So it is up to you if you want to provide that. The reason why they recommend having some kind of science professors as an evaluator is because they would be able to speak on behalf of your academic abilities and let them know kind of like a prediction of what and how you would perform in medical school with the rigor of that coursework. That's why it is recommended. However, it is not required. So it is up to you. However, you want to mix that. If you want to have all science professors, if you're able to do that. If not, that's okay. Um, but yes, it is also equally important that they get to know you besides what's on your application because they will be able to take a look at your coursework page and other information, but letters of recommendation would really let the admissions committees know a little bit more about you and who you are. So if you have people who know like your work ethic or any other characteristics or skills that you can bring to the table that can speak on behalf of those, that would also be equally as great. And let me go ahead and drop in the link for the letters page that talks about what kind of characteristics each different type of evaluator can help you bring into your application, depending on what you want to let the schools know about you. So let me find that and I'll link it in the chat. Okay, I'm not able to find it right now at this time, but I know we have it. If you want to give us a follow-up message, so that way we can let our team know, or you can let our team know that this is the article that you're looking for, or more information about who your evaluator should be, they can definitely send you a link to that. Article so you can take a look at it. So send us a message in your portal if you want that follow up. So right now I'm not able to find it right now, but if you send us a message, then our team can send you that for you. All right, another question from Kelsey. Is the best representation of how the AdComs will look at our application through the downloadable PDF format. Just want to double check for formatting, especially for essays. Um, Not quite sure about that acronym, but I believe what you're asking is whether the schools will be able to view your downloadable PDF. Yes, the schools will be able to view that on their end if they want to. They also have access to your actual application in the pages themselves. So, yeah, if you're noticing any kind of weird things or formatting with your essays, I would highly double check on that and make adjustments if needed. Okay. Follow-up question from Yvonne. Yes, I was asking about TCOM and wondered if they would have a place to have to save the student's secondary if they sent it in before the primary was transmitted. Great question. I don't have an answer to that. It sounds like that's a question for TCOM, since it's regarding their secondary application. I'm not quite sure how that works on their end. I'm assuming that they would have a place for your secondary application to enter your TMDSAS ID number. Again, that is just me thinking out loud. That's probably what they would do. But again, I'm not sure. So maybe that's a question for the school specific. Okay. Oh, actually, I did get a response from our team, from one of my team members, um, in regarding to the letters of evaluation and who your evaluator should be, whether it should all be professors or not. So let me just go ahead and get that link, and I'll put it into the chat. All right, and because that was a long answer, it did break it up into two. But yeah, the information is there. I forgot who asked that question, but yeah, there's a link to the article as well as what is in within that article that tells you that it is recommended that you have at least one of your evaluators to be a current or former professor who can speak to your academic ability in the sciences. Again, that gives the medical schools, dental schools, podiatry, and vet schools an idea of how you would perform in those classes whenever you begin school there, because that coursework is rigorous. So getting a little bit of insight as to how you do academically would help them in their decision. All right, let me see where I'm at. Okay, question from John. How long should our descriptions be? Should planned activity descriptions be different from other ones? Description should be as long as you have them fit within the character description. I believe most description boxes allow you up to 500 characters, including spaces. However you want to talk about your activity descriptions, as long as they fit within that box. Planned activity descriptions, yes. You want to make sure that all your descriptions are different. They're not the same. It's not a copy and paste. That's the one thing that schools do not want to see is you copying every description into every box. So if you're going to talk about um, an activity that will happen in their planned activities, you might want to consider talking about what you plan to do in that future time or what you plan to get out of it, just to show the schools what you're kind of working on and what you would like to continue working on or what you want to do. But again, if you want to have specific questions about your activities, how to categorize them or how to enter them or what to include in those descriptions, I highly, highly recommend that you check out that schools panels, either the dental or the medical, whichever one applies to you. If I have a separate lecture class and lab class in my transcript, how should I add them? It sounds like your transcript has listed them out separately. It sounds like it might be 3 hours of lecture, one of lab. In your application, you are able to distinguish that. You're able to use the course area lecture and lab. So just use that accordingly with each of those. If you have questions about what those course areas look like, I will send you a link here in just a minute. Okay. And all this information I'm pulling from the application guide. So if you ever are wondering where this information is, it's in the guide. I know sometimes it can be hard to read through all that, but the information is there to help you and provide additional insight. So course areas, and this is going to show you what the drop down that you will get when entering your courses will look like. All the options are listed in this part of that page. Alrighty, let's see. All right, question from Sam. For terms attended, do we list semesters we were enrolled but did not take courses, such as listing summer terms during sophomore year if we didn't take classes during the summer? The answer is no. Terms attended is only for you to list the terms in which you took courses. So my best advice is to follow what's on your official transcript. If there's not a summer, let's say summer 2020 listed because you didn't take any courses, and don't enter it into your application. If you do, you will run into the tech issue warning message that will give you a message something along the lines of you entered a term or did not enter courses because you didn't take any courses. So if only enter terms that you took courses in. And if you have any questions about whether those should be included or not, I would say reference your official transcript because those will tell you exactly what terms you attended and which terms you took courses. For entering courses, one of my classes has a plus in the title, but I can't enter this character on the application. Is it okay to not enter this, or would it show an inconsistency with my transcript? Um, I'm not quite sure about it giving that issue in the title itself. I haven't encountered that issue in past cycles, so I'm not sure. But if you've already tried that and it's not allowing you to, I think that should be fine. Um, as long as you have everything else, which I'm assuming the rest of it would be actual words or letters, and that should be fine. Eventually, if you are requested to send in a transcript once you've been accepted, if you're a medical applicant and dental, or if you are a vet applicant, that would happen whenever you receive an interview invite. But when that time comes, if that happens, then as long as you have your, let's see, as long as you have most of what's on your course name in your application showing like what's on your transcript, then you should be fine. But I haven't encountered instances where it gives you issues in the title, but let me see what I can find out really quickly. Okay, it appears that yeah, so you would not be allowed to enter special characters for your course titles. So it looks like you won't be able to add in a plus. But like I mentioned, if you make sure that everything else is listed correctly, exactly as it appears on that transcript, then you should be fine. How does AP credit affect how we classify as freshman, sophomore, etc. on the coursework page for classes? If we have 30 hours of AP credit, then our first semester will be classified sophomore. The answer is no. Your first 30 hours at your main institution have to be freshman. It doesn't matter how many credit hours you received prior to that, that would be classified as pre-freshman. You could have 30, 40, 50 hours. I know a lot of applicants took a lot of coursework during high school to count as college credit. But your first 30 hours at your main institution have to be listed as freshman. After that, then you can just base it off of your credit hours to make your academic status determinations, but make sure that you follow the pre-freshman, freshman, sophomore, and junior, senior post-bac sequence as needed. And in some cases, you may not even have senior courses classified as your senior academic status, and that's okay because the schools understand that nowadays a lot of our applicants don't necessarily have to complete their coursework in 4 years. They might do that in less time. So, again, it doesn't matter how many hours of AP credit you receive. All that has to be pre-freshman, and your first 30 hours at your main institution have to be freshman. Okay, we have another question, a follow-up question from Amar. When entering a description of something like research lab, do we describe the lab and goal of the lab or what our role slash what we did in the lab was? It's up to you. So you, as the applicant, are familiar with your activities and what you want to talk about those, what you want the schools to know specifically about that activity. I recommend that you take a look at those school panels, if in case they might have said something about that. If not, maybe perhaps reach out to the schools if you have questions. But we can't necessarily tell you what to put since you're the expert in this situation and know what you did during your activity. If you have any further questions, I can provide a resource to how to categorize your activities. That gives examples of how you can enter your activities based on what you want to talk about. Um, Not sure if it gives an example specific to your question, but it does give you an example of how you might enter like a healthcare or a community service, community engagement activity, etc. So just so you can get an idea of what you might want to talk about. And I know that the school panels did provide insights as to what to put in those descriptions. So I think it would be in your best benefit to take a look at those and see what their responses were to that. That way, you know how you can tailor your descriptions to what they would like to see. And here is the article in your activities. If you have any questions, for examples, you can take a look at that. Question from Catherine Wells. Will you get secondaries from every school you apply to? Yes. So once the application is transmitted to the schools, then the schools at that point, again, it depends on which ones. Most of them will send you an invite to complete those secondary applications. With maybe I think exceptions from two schools that I mentioned earlier. I think it's TCOM and I think a vet school. Their portal would be ready whenever you are to complete those. But in most instances, the schools will contact you to complete those. And if you apply to every single school that we have available in our application, every single school would most likely get back to you and tell you, here is the link to where you can access the portal, or here's information about secondaries, etc. But that information will come straight from the schools, not from TMDSAS, since we don't manage secondary applications. Okay, let's see. For inputting languages, I'm fluent slash proficient in the application. I wasn't able to find the one of the languages that I speak in the choices on the application. Do you know how to input that? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm gonna pull up my dummy application. But I believe you do have the choice of selecting other or a box that gives you the ability to enter another language that wasn't already listed. So let me see if I can find a copy of that. Yes, so you are able to, in that drop-down menu, after it asks if you're bilingual or multilingual, click yes, and then the drop-down menu go through all the way down to O where it says other. Once you select other, then it'll give you a text box, and it'll allow you to put if you are beginner, intermediate, expert, slash native. It looks like it won't let you add that specific language, but it will allow you to enter like if you have another language that you are proficient in, what level of proficiency you are with that level. Um, if it's not, I don't think it has that box where you can enter the name of that language, but if you would like, you can add it in another part of your application, such as your activities, the optional letter space for your essay, anything else, anywhere else where you think it might be useful to list and name that specific language, which I think would be beneficial to list in your application elsewhere, because that is another language that you are proficient in some way and might be helpful for you in working with potential or future patients that may speak that language as well. And I hope that answers your question. All right, we have a question from George. Would paid private tutoring be considered employment or community engagement? Again, it's up to you. You are the expert in this activity, and so you know what you want to talk about from this activity. Remember that for this one, because you could look at it as either employment or community engagement. It has to be one or the other. Choose whichever section you think would be best to talk about that specific activity and how you want to talk about it. And I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know. But really, with activities, it's going to be all up to you guys. Since you guys were the ones who participated in those activities, and even though you did, let's say, for example, I babysat children over the summer. It's an example. So let's say I babysat my neighbor's kids over the summer and I was paid. I guess it would be at that point for me to determine what I want to talk about that specific activity and how I think that would be better listed in my application for it to benefit me. Do I just want to talk about how I made money off of it? I could put that under employment. But what does that give the schools? Should I talk about how it gave me an opportunity to work with children from a specific age? Maybe that would be more beneficial. Maybe I talk about that aspect of the activity. Or maybe say there's so many different things that you can talk about as an activity depending on what you want to talk about. Maybe I want to talk about how this allowed me to have better management skills. I don't know, something along those lines. And then I would talk about that with that specific activity. So, depending on what you want to talk about, your activity will help you determine where it needs to be categorized. So, if I wanted to talk about how it helped me make money over the summer to pay for books, then I would put that under employment because I'm talking about the employment aspects specifically. So I hope that helps, and I hope that gives you kind of an insight as to many different directions that you can go in to talk about one activity, depending on what it is that you want to highlight and for it to stand out in your application. So that is why TMDSAS support, we can't necessarily tell you where to put those activities. That has to be up to you. So I hope that kind of helps you all kind of understand a little bit more about activities. There's a lot of opportunities that you have with those and how you want to list them that we might not be able to help you with. It's something that you would just have to think about and reflect on how you want to talk about that activity and what you want to highlight. We have a question from Hamza. Howdy. I was wondering what would count as other science. I'm a psychology major, so I'm not sure where to put those courses. Yes, let me take a look at our course classifications and definitions. I'll also link that below so you can take a look at that as well. Again, everything I pull from is the application guide. So I will never give you guys an answer that wouldn't be from that, and I will never be making it up for you guys. So let me copy that link and put it down below in the chat. Okay, so once you get that link, you can take it and put it in your browser. It'll pop up with the page, the coursework page in the application guide. Um, it'll take you to the section called Coursework Definitions in PCR. I am looking directly at the box, the gray box that says Coursework Definitions and Classifications. And if you scroll down below, so that gives you a list of different topics that would be covered in a course to make that course considered as like an English or bio prereq. And because other science courses would not be counted as prereqs, it does give you a list of different topics that could be covered under that. A lot of it looks like a lot of your psychology courses would be considered other science, since psychology is a topic that is listed under the other science box and definition. So take a look at that. And if you're ever in doubt as to what to code your courses, just use your best judgment. You are not going to be penalized if these are incorrect when you get the application submitted. Our processing team will take a look at that to make sure everything is entered in correctly. They might make adjustments if needed to make sure that your courses follow these course definitions. And this is information that we take from the schools. The TMDCS member institutions give us this information and tell us which topics need to be covered in specific prereqs and what is considered an other or non-science course. So this is not stuff that we're making up. This is coming directly from the TMDSAS schools, and they're the ones who put these topics into place. And so it looks like psychology would be considered an other science. And a follow-up question to that is, would research credits also fall under other science? Thank you for your help. No problem. Um, for research questions, those can be tricky at times. So let me see what information I can find about that. I understand with research courses, it can be tricky because sometimes research courses are a variety of different things, and there's not a lot of given with just the title research in the name. I know research can count towards different topic matters. So let me see what I can find in this page. But in the meantime, while I look for this answer, let me know if you guys have any other questions regarding coursework, any other section of your application. We are here already at 43-minute mark, but again, we'll be here up to no later than an hour if needed to help answer any questions. I know that this week is a submission week. It's the first week that you're able to submit your application. So if you have any questions that you need answered before you submit, now would be a great time to ask for those to be answered. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything specific in the guide. But using your best judgment advice from the courses and course areas and classification, and knowing that you will not be penalized for incorrect course coding areas, I recommend that you take a look at your research course. If it has like a bio or chem prefix, that indicates that it was a science course. So you can code it as either bio or chem, depending on what that research topic was about for that particular science course. And again, you won't be penalized for incorrect course area coding, so you can go ahead and list it as such, depending on what that prefix is. I hope that answers your question. But again, if you can take anything out of this, is that you will not be penalized for incorrect course coding areas. Just do your best. We're not out here to get you guys, and the schools are definitely not out to get you guys either. They're not looking for any little mistake to toss out an application. So no worries. Just follow what's in the course areas and definitions page to code your courses because you will not be penalized if those are incorrect. Sam's question is, what days are Team DC's office hours held at? Right now, we are testing them out on Tuesdays. It was between Tuesdays and Wednesday afternoons at this time between 1 to 2 p.m. Central Time. These are recorded, so after the session is done, you will be able to find this recording on our YouTube page. So I recommend subscribing to that. You will also get notifications when our office hours will be held. But for the most part, it looks like right now we're going to test it out for Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Central Time. So next week we will also have this office hour ready to answer any of y'all's questions. But if you guys have any other times that might work best for y'all, go ahead and let us know in that chat so that way we can start getting information to know when is the best time to host those. We previously used to host TMDSA's office hours on Monday afternoons, but I don't think Mondays are the best day for our viewers. So if you like this time, let us know. If not, if you have other suggestions, also let us know. See, I have a follow-up question from Kelsey. I'm attending a head and neck anatomy workshop in July. Where is the best place I should put this experience? Again, it's going to be up to you. What do you want to talk about this specific workshop? Depending on what you want to highlight from this activity will help you determine where to put it in your activities. So TMDSA support, I'm part of TMDSA support. We can't tell you where to put this, but all we can tell you is how to enter it if needed with versus current versus planned activities, or if it's ongoing, how to put it into both. Um, but again, this is going to be dependent on what you want to highlight from this activity. So that's as much as that information I can give you. But I have no doubt that you will be able to reflect on this activity and know what you want to talk about to help you determine how to put it into your application. I wish we had concrete answers for how to categorize these activities. However, it really just depends on what you want to talk about your activity. Because again, if you heard earlier my babysitting example, I could use that activity and talk about a lot of different things, more than just employment. I could talk about a lot. So that is the reason why it's best that you reflect on what you want to talk about. All right. My mom is a substitute teacher. Would that count as other teacher or instructor? I think you're referring to the occupation for your parent. I would say use whatever best fits your mom's occupation. If that's what you were able to find, I would just go ahead and you go with that. We have a question from Cody. Do schools notify you if your application is no longer considered? I believe it depends on the schools and how they decide to reach out to applicants. I know that there are some schools that will reach out and let you know if you've been rejected. I know some schools do not. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have a list of what schools do and which ones don't. So to kind of get a clarification on which schools would reach out to you, I would recommend that you reach out to the schools specifically that you're wanting to apply to see what their process looks like for um, application consideration and status. So what I can give you is the contact page to um, contact the member institutions. It is listed on our website. And all of the school's information is listed on there with phone number, sometimes email if they provided it for us. But yeah, just reach out to the schools and you can ask them what their process looks like to notify applicants about their application status. Right, we have a question from John. Where should I add a travel abroad experience? So again, depends on you and what you want to talk about from that experience. So there's different activity categories that you can select from. So let's see. I'm going to take a look at that. Activities. you have lots to choose from. So you have academic recognition, non-academic recognition, leadership, employment, research, healthcare, dental experience, veterinary supervised, animal experience, community service, which I believe is now community engagement, extracurricular, manual dexterity, meaningful activities, and planned activities. So you have a variety of sections or categories that you can list this activity in. So it just depends on what you want to talk about specifically from this activity. Okay, we have a question from Shayna. If you have medical certifications, does that go under academic section? Um, I would say it depends. It sounds like it could go under either academic or non-academic recognition, depending the um, on the specific certification. I know from some applicants have told us that they put these types of certifications into the non-academic recognition, but ultimately it's going to be up to you. But yeah, I think it can go into either one of those, depending on what you want to talk about. Okay. Another question from Hamza. I took physics over the summer. I took both over two separate terms, but on the transcript it shows both as summer. Should I go with what's on the transcript? Yes, go with what's on your transcript. Even if you might have taken like summer one and summer two, and that it's whatever. I would say just go with what's on your transcript, just because if you later get accepted or interviewed if you're a vet applicant, but if you're a medical or dental podiatry applicant, uh, TMDSAS will request transcripts from you once you've been accepted by one of those schools. And at that point, our team will validate your coursework. What that means is they will look at your transcript and what you have in your application to make sure that you entered everything correctly as it appears on an official transcript. So just use what's on your official transcript. That's a good rule of thumb for anything that you want to enter into your application. Just enter it exactly as it appears on that transcript. So if you only have summer, I would just enter summer. Okay, another question about secondaries. How early are secondaries sent out? I know it takes 2 to 4 weeks for your application to be processed, um, but after it is processed, great question. Again, it depends on the schools. I'm not, all I know is that the schools, upon receiving your application, would most likely send you that invitation to fill out the secondaries. But each school is different in their process. So if you have any questions about that, I suggest contacting the schools specifically to find out how long that might take. I think it just depends. Some schools might reach out immediately, might do it after reviewing your application. It just depends on their end and what their process is. All right, for gap year jobs that are out of state, how do you verify your residency? If you were born in Texas and went to both high school and college in Texas and still have a permanent home in Texas, but work at a state. Great question. I'm not very knowledgeable about residency, but what I can say is that you want to make sure that you are not out of the state for longer than a year. Yes, that's as far as I know about residency and um, your being out of state and how that might affect your residency status. So I would recommend that if you have any follow-up questions in regards to this specific question about residency, if you've already started your application, go ahead and send a message in your TMDCS application portal. If you have not, then you can send us an email to info@tmdscs.com, and I'll put that into the chat. Any questions that we get in this inbox regarding residency are forwarded to a residency specialist who can address that question. I'm not a specialist, so unfortunately, I cannot provide additional information about residency at this time. Another question from Kelsey, usually how long does application processing usually take? I just wanted to get a bit more clarity on that. Application processing will take up to 4 weeks to process. It just depends on the number of applications are submitted per day that usually determine that. I will say that May through July are the busiest parts of the cycle, and so most people would be submitting their application then. So I would say that any application submitted during that time would most likely really do definitely hit that 4 week mark because there's so many applications that our team has to process. I recommend that once you submit your application, you be on the lookout for the homepage on the TMDCS website, which I will link in the chat right now. So our homepage, once you go to that, on the right-hand side, you will see a blue box, and it says TMDSAS is currently processing letters of evaluation, both direct upload and interfolio, and it'll soon show the time that it takes to process applications. So that'll tell you the date in which our team is currently processing applications for that specific date. So that way you can get an idea. Has it been um, about 4 weeks since I submitted my application? And if so, let me go to teamdsas.com and check and see what day they are specifically reviewing applications from that specific date. That information is not on there just yet because application submission started yesterday. But once our team has been able to go through that and be able to update that information, they will have it shown on that blue box. So to sum it up, your application processing does take up to 4 weeks to process before it is sent out to the schools. For more information as to which date our team is currently processing applications submitted on a specific date, check out the tmdcs.com homepage. All right. Question from Dana. How do my letter evaluators submit the recommendation letters to Team DCS? So that depends on their preference. In the letters of evaluation section, which I will link so you can take a look at that as well, they have the option of submitting it via direct upload or interfolio. Um, what we recommend is direct upload because that's usually the fastest. It's within our own portal system that we can download those letters that they submit on your behalf. So ultimately, I would say direct upload is the best method. What happens is that you enter their information into your letters of evaluation section. It'll ask for an email address. That'll prompt our system to automatically send them an email to that email address with a link to the portal. So take a look at this page for additional questions, but that's typically how an evaluator would be able to submit your letters. If you choose the interfolio option, I believe that's a separate process for that, and there is information on the interfolio website to give you information as to how that would work on their end. And I linked the letters of evaluation page. Okay, so I will answer these last two questions that we have in the chat. It is 1:59, so I want to be mindful of our time and making sure that I get to these last two questions that are in the chat. A question from Hamza is if we submit a late MCAT, how would that affect my application? Not quite sure what you mean by late MCAT. What I can say is that the last day that you can submit an MCAT to be considered for this cycle would be the last day that the AMC has listed for a date in September. Um, according to I have that listed right here on my wall. It looks like your last date would be September 9th. That is the last MCAT test date that you can take for it to be considered for this cycle. For now, just know that if you want to submit your primary application, you can. You don't have to have your scores already attached to it. You don't have to have your letters attached to it. Basically, you want to submit your application because it takes up to 4 weeks to process that application. That's the time that you can use as a sweet spot to make sure that your MCAT and your letters are submitted. So that way, whenever that application is finally transmitted to the schools will have a completed application that has your primary application, your scores, and your letters. So there's not necessarily I would say there's not necessarily a late MCAT besides that last day, which you can take is on September 9th. And I would just say take advantage of that 4 week window to get all that information in, your letters and your scores. So that way, whenever your application is finally transmitted, it's completed and everything is in there. And our last question from Caitlin is, even though I've completed all sections of the application, for some reason my chronology of activities page says complete personal biography. Has that ever been an issue before? Not quite sure. I don't think I've seen that error message. I do know that you cannot have gaps more than 3 months, so maybe that's probably why. But if you have any further issues with the page, I would recommend sending us a message in your portal so that way we can have a team member take a look at that. And that's it. That's all the questions that we have for this time. I want to thank you all for joining in and participating and asking great questions. And again, we'll see you guys next Tuesday at the same time at 1 p.m. Central Time. And thank you, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye, everyone.